There is a quiet moment that comes to many people late in life. It often arrives when the house is still, the noise of the world has softened, and memories feel louder than the present. In that moment, you might notice certain thoughts returning again and again, not sharply, not with panic, but gently, almost like old acquaintances knocking without urgency. Some thoughts feel warm, others feel unfinished, and some feel like questions that were never asked out loud. You may recognize this feeling, the sense that time did not rush past you, it simply moved. And now, standing here, you can see it more clearly than before. You might wonder why certain choices still linger in your mind, why some moments feel heavier than others, why peace sometimes feels close, yet not fully settled. And you might ask yourself, quietly, without judgment, was there anything I misunderstood along the way? In retirement, days stretch differently. There is more space, more silence, more room for reflection. At first, that space can feel like freedom. Later, it can feel like distance. Distance from routines, from roles, from the version of yourself who is always needed somewhere else. You may notice that some mornings feel slower than you expected, not because your body resists the day, but because your mind is no longer rushing ahead. You might sit with a cup of tea longer than planned, stare out a window, watch light move across the room. And during those moments, certain memories surface. Not the dramatic ones, not the milestones everyone talks about, but the quieter moments, the conversations that never happened, the feelings that were postponed. You may think about how often you told yourself, not now, later, later when things calm down, later when there is more time. And now, with time finally here, you may notice how often you lived as if time was endless. Many people reach their later years surprised by how quickly decades blended together. Not because life was empty, but because it was full of responsibility. You spent years being reliable, doing what needed to be done, showing up, providing stability. And that reliability became part of your identity, something others counted on, something you took pride in. Yet deep down, there may be a quiet recognition that you often place your own needs at the very end of the line, not because you were weak, but because you were strong. You might recall moments when rest felt undeserved, when joy felt optional, when speaking up felt inconvenient. At the time, those choices felt practical, responsible, even loving. Only later do some people realize that they rarely asked themselves how they were truly doing, not how things looked, but how they felt inside. As the years pass, this realization can bring a soft sadness, not regret in the dramatic sense, but a gentle ache, an awareness that emotional needs were treated as background noise, always present, never urgent. There is also the realization that relationships were sometimes maintained through duty rather than honesty, that peace was kept by avoiding difficult conversations, that silence felt safer than vulnerability. At 80, many people recognized that they protected others from discomfort at the cost of their own truth. They were kind, they were patient, they were understanding, but they were not always understood. Some noticed that they waited too long to express love in their own words. They assumed it was obvious. They believed actions were enough. And often they were, but words have a different weight. Unspoken appreciation can turn into quiet longing. Unsaid apologies can remain unfinished stories. There is also the realization that health was often treated as something that would take care of itself, not through neglect, but through postponement. You trusted that your body would adapt, that tomorrow would always be an option. Only later does it become clear that listening earlier would have felt kinder. Not perfect, just kinder. Another realization that surfaces late in life is how much energy was spent worrying about outcomes that never arrived, the fears that occupied long nights, the scenarios imagined that never lived. So much emotional energy invested in what might go wrong. So little reserve for what felt good in the moment. At 80, many people can see how worry borrowed peace from years that could have been softer, not easier, just gentler. There is often reflection around money as well, not in terms of amounts, but in terms of meaning. Some people realized they treated money as safety rather than as a tool. They protected it carefully, sometimes too carefully, not out of greed, out of fear of instability. And later, they wonder if they were overly cautious with experiences that could have nourished the soul. Small joys delayed, simple pleasures postponed, not because they wanted more, but because they feared having less. Another quiet realization is how identity became tied to productivity, how worth felt connected to usefulness, how rest felt uncomfortable. Retirement removes the structure that once confirmed your value. And in that silence, many people realize they never fully learned how to simply be. They were always becoming, always achieving, always contributing. At 80, some regret not practicing presence earlier, not learning to sit with themselves without needing to justify it. And then there is the realization about time with people, not the quantity, but the quality. Many people remember being physically present but emotionally elsewhere, thinking about work, responsibilities, tomorrow. They now understand that moments with loved ones were more fragile than they seemed, that conversations were not guaranteed, that togetherness was not permanent. This understanding does not arrive with blame, it arrives with tenderness. At some point, the shift happens, not suddenly, but gradually. The regrets soften into insights, the heaviness becomes wisdom. You realize that regret is not punishment. It is information. It shows you what mattered, what still matters. And here is the quiet truth many people discover late in life. It is rarely too late to live differently. You may not be able to rewrite the past, but you can change the tone of the present. You can speak words you once withheld. You can allow yourself small joys without justification. You can rest without apology. You can choose honesty over harmony when it matters. You can choose peace over perfection. You can forgive yourself for not knowing what you know now, because the version of you who made those choices did the best they could with what they understood at the time. Awareness is not meant to hurt you. It is meant to soften you. At this stage of life, dignity does not come from having done everything right. It comes from understanding yourself with compassion, from allowing life to be imperfect, from letting go of the idea that there was one correct way to live. You may find comfort in knowing that many people reach these realizations quietly, without announcements, without drama, just a gentle settling. And perhaps the deepest peace comes not from eliminating regret, but from listening to it without judgment, letting it guide you toward more presence, more honesty, more kindness toward yourself. As the days continue slower and quieter, you may notice that what matters now feels simpler: connection, comfort, being at ease with who you are. And in that simplicity there is room for grace, not the kind that demands change, but the kind that allows you to breathe, the kind that says you are allowed to be here just as you are.